Center Center. Here is Stone Phillips.
Good evening. In the end, it wasn't even close. The Senate today voting to acquit President Clinton on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice. We'll have the day's events, plus an interview with a woman whose secret tape recordings started it all, turning a private affair into a very public scandal. Linda Tripp. But first, a detective story. It's about a different kind of detective who cracks cases not by pounding the pavement, but by poring over papers. Instead of fingerprints or DNA, he analyzes ink, where it comes from and how long it's been dry. If a record's been altered to cover something up, chances are he'll uncover it. And as you're about to see, the stakes can be very high. Here's Rob Stafford.
She showed me her wrist, and she said that she had tried to cut her wrist, and the only thing that had stopped her was that she didn't want us to think badly of her.
10 years ago, Kelly Trotter seemed to have everything a 16-year-old could want. Good looks, honor roll grades, parents who loved her. But it wasn't enough. Gripped by depression, she talked often of suicide. Her parents, Mickey and David, put her under the care of a psychiatrist referred by their HMO, Dr. Gonzalo Mesa.
Did you think that she needed to be hospitalized?
Yes.
Did you tell Dr. Mesa that?
Yes, I did.
What did he say?
He said that I was wrong, that she was acting out, that she was making up all this, that she was manipulating us, and that we shouldn't take her seriously.
Then the worst happened.
I had this intense feeling like I've never had in my life. Knocked on the bathroom door that was closed and couldn't get it, and it was locked, couldn't get an answer, and managed to unlock it with a key.
What he found was his 16-year-old daughter dead on the floor. A suicide. David and Mickey Trotter blamed Dr. Mesa. They sued him for malpractice, claiming he had failed to respond adequately to Kelly's condition. But Dr. Mesa said no. He had taken Kelly's depression very seriously, and he had these meticulous records to prove it. The records clearly show Dr. Mesa prescribing intensive treatment, including medications and hospitalization. The charts also show resistance to that treatment by Kelly's mother, Mickey. She said the medications were not helping and that she wanted alternatives. Dr. Mesa told her she was undermining the treatment of her daughter, Kelly.
These are Dr. Mesa's records regarding Kelly. It says that he recommended hospitalization almost a month prior to the suicide.
Absolutely not.
When you read Dr. Mesa's records regarding Kelly, it seems as though he's the one who wanted medication. He's the one who wanted her to go to the hospital, and you were the ones who were reluctant.
And in fact, it was the reverse. We were pressing for the medication, the hospitalization, and he was refusing.
So who do you believe? Grief-stricken, distraught parents who might simply be searching for someone to blame, or a respected, licensed physician with meticulous medical files to back up his story?
This whole page, which contained a number of entries, had been rewritten, in other words, made up after the fact. The original page had been taken out of the file and destroyed. This new page then created and put into the file.
Meet the equalizer. Leonard Speckin, examiner of questioned documents. Using sophisticated technology, he was able to show Dr. Mesa had altered Kelly's chart after the fact, and that the Trotter's account of what happened was right all along.
Is the Trotter's case unusual?
No, sadly, it is not unusual. It is a typical case. It's a typical case of medical record alteration.
The Trotters won their suit in court, and Dr. Mesa was ultimately convicted in a separate criminal trial for misdemeanor altering of medical records. He declined to comment for this story. Leonard Speckin says he's seen over 1,000 cases of doctors altering records after being sued. He's even had some repeat customers. One doctor he caught 3 different times.
They would alter the records one way. We would catch them. The next case would come up. They would get sued. They would alter the records another way, using a different way, and then we'd catch them with a different technology. And the next time they try it again a different way, we'd catch them again.
But it isn't just medical records dealing with issues of life and death.
Leonard Speckin and more than 150 other document examiners from around the country routinely find all sorts of altered records. Diaries, calendars, bank checks, expense report receipts, just about anything you can write on. But how accurate is this technology? Well, you might be surprised by what you're about to see. We decided to put Leonard Speckin's detective skills to the test. Could I have a receipt?
We started with a common and easy-to-alter item, the taxi cab receipt. We were careful to use the same color pen.
I'll take this cab receipt. It says $30. I'll change the 3 to an 8 to make that $80. It says 121, as in January 21st. I will change that to 421 to make that April 21st. We'd like to put your technology to the challenge. You ready for that?
I'm ready.
I have a wallet full of receipts, and here's some taxi cab receipts. Take a look at this one. I've been told that some people alter these things.
I've heard that. Now, let's see if it has been altered in some way. Rob, what happened here? The receipt was originally $30, and now, when you handed it to me, it says $80.
So how can you tell?
Well, you did a great job. You color matched the inks beautifully, but it is a different ink chemistry. And this different ink chemistry is reacting differently to the wavelengths that it's being examined at in the image converter.
So even if the ink is the same color, if it's from a different pen, you can tell?
We can tell the color really has nothing to do with it. If it's an ink that has a different ink chemistry, in other words, from a different pen, then it's easy to tell.
And Speckin says that in instances where several pens may have been used on a document, he can pinpoint the date the ink was put on the page and determine whether entries were made after the fact. Speckin has used the technology to help prosecutors convict murderers, bank robbers, and all sorts of other criminals. And what if a page is missing? How in the world can Speckin figure out what was written on a page that someone threw away? He simply pulls out the page underneath the one that was thrown away and puts it into this machine.
This is the developing powder, which should bring up the impressions.
Speckin can read the indentations from a pen or pencil up to 5 pages below the page that was actually written on.
Now you see, Rob, how cleanly it comes up. It's crystal clear. The message says, spoke with Speckin, and I am skeptical about his entire operation. Oh, I'm sorry you're skeptical. Maybe this will help relieve some of your skepticism.
Not as skeptical now.
But is Speckin's technology really foolproof? The final test. Again, we give him the page underneath the one that was written on.
Can you read it?
I can read one word, the word you, Y-O-U.
Do you want to see what it says?
I do.
There you go.
It says, I bet you can't see this.
Why couldn't you get this one?
Because you wrote this in crayon.
I did.
And crayon does not imprint on the page underneath the same way pencil or ball pen imprints.
Crayon is the kryptonite that can take down even the super scientist.
That's correct. It can result in an inconclusive, except there is another way that crayon can betray you.
And what way is that?
That's a secret I'll keep to myself.
Speckin says that while he can be fooled, it is very unlikely. He says most people get caught, like Dr. Gonzalo Mesa did when he changed Kelly Trotter's medical records.
He almost escaped. If it hadn't been for Leonard Speckin and his work with the documents, it would be very unlikely that they could have ever found him guilty of what he was truthfully responsible for.
Trial attorneys around the country routinely rely on document examiners like Leonard Speckin to help with cases and don't think it's just paper they're after. Many document examiners know computers well enough to dig up those electronic files you thought you deleted for good.
This
Boston police say that on Thanksgiving morning, Lamont Samuels got tired of hearing a baby crying upstairs. So guess what he did about it? Samuels shot both of the baby's parents. Fortunately, they survived, but now Samuels is on the run. Is these letters. Tonight, our John Turchin takes you inside the letters for our exclusive new clues in a war that's measured in microns, the size of a spore of anthrax.
The FBI recently unveiled their profile of the anthrax terrorist. But because profiling is an imperfect science, the contents were not very specific. An adult male with little contact with the public who may have noticeable mood swings. In a briefing, the Bureau also seemed to indicate that their suspect is most likely an American working from within the country. But aside from an FBI profile, is there more we can learn? Clues we don't know contained within the letters. The experts say there are a lot of them. We showed several experts the letters to find these hidden clues, little clues that could reveal the writer's true identity. They all said the first clue is the handwriting. Linda James is a handwriting expert. She noticed little swishes at the end of pen strokes. Experts call them ticks, and they are very significant.
I did see some ticks, and I also saw a pen slur, which tells me that perhaps that's a habit that kicked in. The more often it's repeated, the more chances it are that it is an actual habit of that writer. That's what we want to see, is the habits of the writer that are so strong that they come through when they're concentrating on the content of the note.
The FBI says the writer is most likely American, but Eric Speckin said don't be so sure. When he looked at the documents, the formation of the individual letters caught his eye. If you look closely at the W's, they are not written in one fluid motion. Rather, they are broken up into segments, as if the writer wasn't familiar with writing W's.
Clues like the W show up all over these letters. Here are two more examples. Most Americans write their twos like this, with a loop. Compare that to the two on the envelope. You can see whoever sent it wrote it with a flat bottom. Okay, now let's take a look at how most Americans write the letter R. We do it like this, with the stem coming out right here. But when you look at the anthrax letters, the R's are consistently different, not the way Americans write them at all.
The R is something that looks highly significant to me. It's formed with what looks like a P and then a staff on the right-hand side to make it an R. I would say there's two possibilities. Number one, it could be a disguise. And the second is that it's someone who's not native English speaker and doesn't write the printed R.
Other experts say there's one other possibility. One group in this country used to write R's and twos like this. They were draftsmen, men and women who drew up blueprints before computers were around. That may indicate our terrorist is somewhat older. Another clue that may indicate our terrorist is foreign, the paper itself. Take a look at the letter to the New York Post. The proportions of the paper are not consistent with a normal 8.5 by 11 paper Americans are used to. It's thinner.
It looks like it's an A4 size paper based on the relationship of the height to the width. An A4 size copy is not typically used in the United States. It's more of an international standard. When you look at all the different components that are used to construct these documents, from the ink, the paper, the handwriting, the photocopiers, the paper sizes, and so on, it can lead you to a specific person very quickly.
While we had copies of the letters, the actual letters themselves would provide experts many more clues. The Speckin lab showed us what the FBI is probably doing with the letters right now. The first step is finding the almost invisible impressions left on the letters.
You can determine several things. Number one, if anything was written on top of the letters or the envelopes. You can also determine if the envelopes were written when the letters were inside.
So let's say someone wrote the letter, mailed it to another co-conspirator who then packaged the anthrax and mailed it out. There would be an impression of a second postmark. The labs could find that impression. Here's how. The document is given a small electrical charge. After covering the page, toner attached to glass beads is poured over it. Those beads attach themselves to any indented impressions. If the anthrax letters hit another postmark, it would appear just like this. The document can then be examined in a machine that, under certain types of lights, opens up other keys to the document. Suddenly, a simple envelope becomes a mosaic of clues pointing to our terrorist. The next critical clue may be in the inks used to create the envelopes.
We have the largest ink library in the world.
With thousands of examples to work from, Speckin Labs can identify the pen used and much more. While examining the envelopes, Eric quickly spotted a clue.
I can tell that the letter to Senator Daschle was written with an ink that's soluble because I can tell that ink is smeared. You can actually see some of the different dyes. There are dyes that can be separated and analyzed in the ink to determine who manufactured it and where they're from.
The FBI also released information that the letters sent were not originals. Every one of these 3 letters is a photocopy. Was that done to hide evidence? Eric says if that was their goal, they failed miserably. Photocopies can actually give more clues to the case.
If these documents, or even one of them, was done on a color photocopier, they have an embedded code in the document that can lead you to the manufacturer and the serial number of the machine that created that copy.
That's right. Just one color copy could lead authorities to the exact machine that created the copies. While that may not ID the terrorist, it sure would lead them in the right direction. The clues are there. It's up to the FBI to determine whether this is the work of a domestic terrorist or a foreign one, or even the 2 working together. What do you think? Log on to our website at amw.com. Take a look at the letters and the clues we've uncovered. We want to hear what you have to say.
Now, here are a few more clues to examine on these letters. First of all, the date is written very large to call attention to itself and make the connection to September 11th. In fact, it draws way too much attention. That's why experts believe there's probably no real connection at all. Also, notice that the writer adds a 0 before the 9. Now, most people would leave off the 0. That's a clue. Perhaps the writer has a job that he fills out a lot of forms. Finally, on 2 letters, the word penicillin is misspelled. Now, specialists think that there may be a deliberate mistake to appear foreign or uneducated. But it won't throw us off track. We're going to put this killer behind bars, and real soon. Now, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Up next,